Yay.
Okay, I think we're good. Okay, everyone, welcome back. Thank you so much for listening to my channel and being here. I'm super excited because we have David back for part 2 of our interview/conversation. And we were really excited about the last one. And then, especially after all of the events that happened at the Capitol last week, we were like, all right, we got to talk again. We wanted to talk again anyways. But especially just with everything going on, we're like, we really got to sit down and chat.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for bringing me back on. Honestly, I really do appreciate it. This couldn't have been better timing, honestly, especially after our last video. So
Yeah. I mean, so we have just like a couple of questions that I sent over to David just to kind of have, some conversation topics prepped. Is there anything before we get started in that you wanna say, you wanna share from either last conversation or just to, open this up?
yeah, just the view for the audience, like just this conversation, at least coming from my opinion, will just try to be as objective as possible. Like I really, obviously it's been, such a challenging, especially this incident occurred, exactly last week today.
Yeah.
And obviously it's still, the ramifications are still, ongoing. So as best as I can, I'm just going to try and give, my viewpoint and, just the perspective of myself. I do not represent, an entire race, but I definitely do have, opinions that are valued on that side. So I feel we'll be sharing some of those today. So.
Okay. So first question, just kind of your overall thoughts on the events that happened last week.
Whew. I mean,
Which is so broad.
I mean, where do we start? I mean, this is going to, our nation's capital and just, having that kind of, start it, as an okay rally and then end it, so poorly with, lives being endangered. I think hopefully that, that awakes America. We've been, so divided on politics and racial issues, ethical issues, and hopefully this is something that will get us to start thinking, at least my hopes are, get us to start thinking how we can go across the aisle, shake hands, and come to some kind of compromise within our nation. I really, like I said, it stinks that something so tragic and something so epic needs to happen in order for us to do that. But sometimes the best things in life aren't always easy. So I think this is hopefully a segue to get us to find that mutual ground amongst different parties, amongst different races, amongst different viewpoints, to kind of hopefully, get a better future. So that way this will be just history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think just agreeing with what you said, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, whatever, I think the common ground is we can all agree that last week never should have happened, or at least it shouldn't have ended the way that it did. And I hope, kind of like you said, that this is a unifying moment in a weird way, that we can all come together and be like, okay, things like, if our eyes weren't opened in 2020 that things need to change, like here is just another example, like another rock bottom, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I like to go back and, just think of, I mean, me and you were old enough to remember, 9/11 and how,
Mm-hmm.
crazy that was. I was in the 5th grade, so I can't say, I was like, old enough to know, what exactly was going on. But obviously, I understood like this is like crazy and not, normal at all. And I think, after the events of that, obviously that's a little bit more of a, foreign altercation on domestic soil, but ultimately it led to, people just coming together and, for a while just kind of being one nation. It didn't matter what side you were on. It was, people died, and we wanted to try to come together and heal. And I think that's exactly, obviously this is a slightly different incident, but I think this is going to be the same exact thing. Is we're just going to, it's going to take time to heal. It's going to take time to mend, and, hopefully we'll move into the right direction. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you, like, how do you feel kind of about the reaction in the last week? Like, have you, I know that that's kind of like, that's so broad also, but do you feel like you're seeing change in people, and obviously you can only see what's in your small bubble, that you
Yeah.
can't speak for the entire country.
Yeah. And so me and my wife, like she even more recently has been following like a lot more news outlets and media, and we try and stay away from it because it can just be so, as I'm sure a lot of people felt, like just draining. Like all when the incident occurred last Wednesday, I think, I went into work and I just was just like, this just sucks. Like today just really does suck. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing. Like I was just like emotionally drained from like seeing all the chaos and seeing all the damage being done, hearing certain things, person being shot. Like it's just like there's just no, good news. So going through, obviously the reactions to that are going to be, depending on, it obviously came down to politics and, hearing, both sides. And I will say one side, coming from people who are not huge Trump supporters, I think the common argument was, this is, if this is Black Lives Matter, this is protesting like they did last year in the Capitol, there's a lot more people, there's a lot more reinforcements of police. Like, where the heck are the police right now? And I know there were a lot of questions and a lot of confusion going on. Even, a few days later, even up until now, there's still, questions going on about, what actually happened that day. And I think just our reaction to these major events in time, for as long as we are on this earth, we have to figure out how to get this information, and not, I wouldn't say, not share your opinion, but just try to understand that when we share these things via media, via social media, like someone somewhere is going to read this and, feel, affected by what you say. So, and I think it's just a matter of trying to find a way to voice our opinion. And I try to do this as best as I can myself, try a way to voice our opinion in a very objective matter. So that way it's not coming off as, I'm going after one side or the other. Even though I think it gets easy to say that one side is wrong, we have to find a way for us to, at the end of the day, be, I don't want to say sensitive, but at least be respectful to
Mm-hmm.
people who would probably disagree with you. Because at the end of the day, the second that you post something and it's super one-sided, that other side, what are they going to do? They're going to get angry. They're going to get mad. They're just going to feel a type of way that is going to be, it's just going to incite even more conversation that isn't healthy. Because
Mm-hmm.
now they're going to come at you, they're going to write on your post, or they're going to say something to you in person. Like there's just no, there's almost no benefit to it sometimes to go after a side, even though they might be, clearly wrong in your mind. And I did kind of feel that way, but I also had to hold myself back at the same time. Is I have to understand, like, somebody somewhere, like, it was more than enough to see, Trump supporters do all of that. Like, what more needed to be said? Like, there was nothing more that needed to be said. Everything was action, and we all got to see it. So there's no point in me coming in and be like, oh, these guys are terrible, these guys are awful, I can't believe what they're doing to the Capitol. Like, it's all out there. I don't need to
Mm-hmm.
say nothing. Nothing needs to be said more on that matter. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just my opinion on that one.
Yeah. So this is like kind of on the same topic. I think this was going to be my last question, but just segueing into that. So, and this is more like my world, I think, just like following a lot of other bloggers and influencers. I felt like on last Wednesday, I saw two different mindsets, I guess. Like I saw and this is just social media. So this is just one small aspect of life. And there were the people who were acknowledging what happened and just like saying how heartbreaking and horrible it was, and whether they were just sharing like an article or a photo or whatever, but just acknowledging it. And then there were the other people who continued out their day as if
Mm,
nothing had happened.
yeah,
And I could defend both sides,
yeah,
because I see both sides. But then like the next day, people were like saying that they were getting messages about not saying anything, and they were like, this is not, so like a lot of people that I follow, you know, the fashion lifestyle bloggers, whatever, and
Yeah,
they
of
said,
course.
this is a fashion and lifestyle page. I have never talked about politics. I will never continue to talk about politics. Like, I want this to be a positive, uplifting outlet. Um, and I don't want to bring that here. Like, I want this to be a place where people can just kind of escape from the reality of life, I guess. But then the other people were like, you saying that is privilege because it doesn't affect your daily life, and you can still post about sweaters and skincare and whatever. And this is not me trying to call people out. I'm just
Yeah.
curious on others' opinions. Like I
Yeah.
said, I could defend both sides.
Mhm.
But the fact that you can still post about sweaters and skincare and whatever like you're doing, that's privilege. And so again, this is probably more of what I see on my feed, but what are your thoughts to that? Like, do you, and then sorry, one more thing. Some
Yeah.
people are like, just because I haven't posted on social media about it doesn't mean I'm not reading, doesn't mean I'm not following the news, doesn't mean that I'm not having conversations behind closed doors, which I totally understand. You don't have to turn to social media when something tragic happens or when something big happens,
Yeah.
but you also have a platform that people are listening, people are watching, people are honestly like turning to you for advice. And I don't know. I kind of I lie somewhere in the middle,
Yeah.
and I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Honestly, like I'm probably right there with you. More days than not is being in the middle. Like you, obviously, I know you for a fact. I understand. There's no way you're like your silence is. Oh, so it's you agreeing with that side, and
Mhm.
I would never. I would if anyone would say anything to you, I'd be like, no, obviously not. You know, that's it's just you. You're just trying to, as you said, you're trying to keep this space super, trying to keep it, happy. You don't want to, reflect on something that's, so damning.
Mhm.
I understand that. And I think the counter argument to that would be, well, that is exactly what white privilege looks like.
Mhm.
Okay, this is true. This is true. And that's where the whole, and I think we talked about last time, cancel culture, comes
Yeah.
in like so hard. And I think we need to ease up just a little bit. And I hope I don't get canceled over it. I think the whole cancel culture, there's a time and place for it. Because if you think about it, the Capitol incident from last Wednesday, it wasn't really a racial thing. If you think about it in whole, what was the whole Capitol rally about? It was about the believing that there was, election fraud, supporting our president, he's still our president. All of that, that's a whole, even though it kind of slightly ties in, that was what the whole incident was about.
So that
So
was,
you,
not to interrupt you, that was another topic that I wanted to bring up. So I'm glad you're segueing into that. So continue.
and that's what I mean is I think that's I yes, the comparisons obviously came out and said, and I'm glad that it's on America's mind still that if this was, Black Lives Matter protest, would it look like the same exact thing? People are right, probably not. It looked entirely different last June when Black Lives Matter took a stand at the Capitol, and there was police reinforced in riot gear and stuff like that, and it's just you know, we, as I said, like the whole cancel culture thing, like we need to just ease up on it just a little bit. We need to know when to use it and when not to use it because there is a time and place. There are people that I do believe need to have their actions corrected and understand, why the entire internet is kind of not on your side. And I think that there are a lot of individuals who probably have learned from that lesson. It doesn't need to get to the point where, people are sending online death threats and stuff like that to those individuals, but they definitely do need to get a check and understand like you upset a lot of people. And there probably is a good reason that many people that have viewed whatever story it may be, got to this point, and understanding that. But I think when it comes to people like you who are really just really good people, genuinely just like trying to learn and trying to understand, especially when it comes to racial inequalities, what, is better said and what's not spoken, what's not to be spoken is just kind of like it's harder for you because, you are trying your best to learn, but you don't have all the knowledge. And
Mhm.
honestly, we're still trying to navigate it. So it's hard. It's going both ways. And I think we just need to continue to have conversations like this
Yeah.
where it is informative for people and where I have this conversation with you afterwards. Hopefully people that are watching this also have conversations with people that are in their lives, and just like, just watch tone. Like it's just everything is in within tone. Like you can't come off to somebody with you who a massive attitude that doesn't agree with you, because the second that you do, it does the exact opposite effect. So it
Mhm.
has to come from a loving place, in your heart, so that way that person actually wants to, hopefully they reciprocate and start to listen to you at the end of the day. So honestly, I think silence, though, when it comes to this matter, I think, me personally, I don't think it doesn't make me say anything less about you at all. Honestly, I mean, I didn't even know how to react. So I can't,
Mhm.
how am I to say, oh, you should have reacted this way. You should have condemned them right away. Like, let's just like gather the feelings here for a second. Like, this was a massive event. Like, let's take a second, let's digest what happened, and just, talk about this in a respectful manner. And, hopefully over time we'll get to that point of where we want to be. But you
Mhm.
cannot expect, one post like, oh, condemning this is, that, like, that's not going to change anything in that matter. Like, it's great to know that you're supportive, but ultimately, like, this is something that's going to take time to, talk about, for a while, honestly. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I definitely like value your opinion in here and enjoy hearing your thoughts because I think like my thoughts have changed, and while I don't know all the answers, I also don't feel like it's right for me to be silent, and just even I feel like to just show support
yeah.
is kind of also my intention. And like when this happened and there was the one quote that I shared and it was like silence. I forgot it off the top of my head, but it was basically like, hold on, I gotta look it up because I don't want to butcher this. Most I have it right here. Mostly for anyone that's listening because it is important to me. Um, shoot. Okay, well now I'm not gonna. Okay, here we go. I choose to not participate in the silence that protects perpetrators and isolates survivors. And that is in regards to domestic violence, but I felt like there were a lot of it was like it aligned with this situation a lot. And that was kind of something that I kept going into in my head where I was like, even though I don't have all the answers, I don't personally want to be 100% silent. Even if I just say one thing,
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know. But again, like I could go both ways when it comes down to like really, I don't know, diving into
Same.
that topic.
Yeah,
But
and that's,
um
I think, to kind of speak on that just one more time, I think a lot and I understand, where you're coming from, in that situation where it is, tough, what do I say? Should I say something? So understanding, like, that is that is definitely a slight white privilege moment for you, but I don't think at the end of the day, like, I'm not going to come at you and say, hey, you should do this, you need to do this, where other people
mhm,
may say that. Like, I think it's up to you. I think you're at least in the middle, so like you can be persuaded, either way at this point. So I think we need to let you make your best judgment, let you, make that decision, because it's got to be personal. Like, it's got to be
mhm,
personal. People who have taken on this cause have made it personal for themselves, and I'm thankful for every single one of those individuals who, believes that, my rights, my life, really do matter. That's
mhm.
huge for me. And I think that sometimes, I can, as I told you, it can be a turn off, when it's too much. And I think that it just needs to come from a loving place, just to hear, hey, this is something that really does matter to me. Like, thank you, for our friendship. Thank you for doing all this, letting me have this platform. Like, this is something, that is so deep to me. So by me having that conversation with you,
Mhm.
hopefully by the end of this, and I know where you stand, but hopefully by the end of this, it's like, this maybe is a bigger cause for me, and this is something that I should be more vocal about. And now we get to that point of, now we have awareness, and once we have
Mhm.
awareness, we can make better informed decisions. And it won't even be a question next time, if something like this occurs, what decision to make at the end of the day. So, like I said, we can't have all the answers right away. We can't have all
No,
the answers.
definitely not. So, kind of touching on what you said before, how this really wasn't a race issue, or the incidents that happened were more about politics and less about black and white, but it also kind of is
Yeah.
a race issue because if it were black protesters, the day would have looked a lot different. People
Yeah.
never would have gotten to the Capitol building.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So what are your thoughts on that? Because I feel like I've read some people being confused and being like, why are people making this about Black Lives Matter when it was about Republicans versus Democrats?
That's the thing, is how it got tied in to how this became such a racial issue. Obviously, is we all at the same exact time kind of drew a parallel between what happened last Wednesday and what had happened over in June when Black Lives Matter had gone and protest at the Capitol. It was two separate scenes entirely. Like police were geared up, and I wanted to kind of talk about what Black Lives Matter is first off, kind of get the background, and then I'll be able to kind of tie the parallel without, losing my train of thought. So it all had started obviously due to the racial and social injustice of Black people, obviously. And the deaths of, Rashard Brooks, Daniel Peroud, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, like all of those people, have died. They've died at the hands of police brutality and what has looked like social injustice, obviously. And based off of that, we saw protests kind of pop up, all over the country over every single one of those incidents. And obviously, we wanted all those incidents to be peaceful. We wanted, nice protests, but at the end of the day, depending on the unique geographical location, within our country, it didn't turn out to be that way. We saw rioting, we saw looting, we saw, burnings of cars. Like the media had portrayed, exactly what we look like. And, there was a great cause. It still is a good cause. It's just unfortunate that when you get, a handful of people or even a larger, group of people, demonstrators who either turn violent or aren't even part of the demonstration and take advantage of the chaos that's ongoing, it doesn't, look good. Your point isn't really getting taken across. And I think that's why people who are, I wouldn't say anti Black Lives Matter, but I would say pro police, if anything, have an issue with Black Lives Matter because they're not seeing the cause, they're seeing the effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the issue is, if somehow we could get, protests to look a little bit more peaceful, I can imagine that the response when Black Lives Matter had moved on to the Capitol over the summer, I think it would have looked a little bit differently. And being realistic, I think that is why there was just so much, so much police presence, riot gear, why they were so prepared, because of what had happened across the nation, not just in the spot where, someone was murdered. Those cities were obviously up in arms, but it had happened across the entire nation when it happened anywhere. And I think that's just being protective. That's just trying to be safe. That's trying to be smart. And I do understand that. So I'm not going to, condemn any of the fighting and any of the ongoing stuff that happened at protests, over the past, year or two. But I will say that's the opposite end of things is when it came to last Wednesday, we haven't really seen, Trump supporters and people who believe that there was election fraud. We haven't really seen a whole lot of damage from them, if I'm being realistic. Like we haven't really seen them, flip cars, burn things. We haven't seen, mass damage to the point where a major police presence is needed.
Mm-hmm.
Incidents have been isolated to, just small individuals and not on a big, larger scale. And I wanted to kind of spill the facts here because I wanted to, as I told you, I wanted to look at this as objectively as I possibly could. That is the only reason why they weren't prepared to the exact situation as the Black Lives Matter, because they didn't think it was as big as a deal. Like most, as I told you before, like Trump supporters are people that don't typically get into trouble on a bigger scale, obviously up until last Wednesday. And I think moving forward, I think you could probably read it all over the news. Like it's going to look like any big major rally for any political person is going to be heavily reinforced now due to that incident and learning from that. So that's where, like I said, the parallels, we can draw them, but now it's like apples to oranges. At least up until last Wednesday, it was apples to oranges. And that's why, so people who are, up in arms about, well, where was the police presence? Why didn't this happen? That's the only reason why. It wasn't as much of a racial thing as people would like to think. We
Hmm.
have to look at it. Police are, they're good at their jobs. We can't condemn, the few police officers who have taken advantage of their power, or, have, a little bit of issues with people of color. Like, we need to look at it from the scope of police officers, as much as we can, and see and understand, for safety reasons over the summer for Black Lives Matter, that is why there was so heavily reinforced, as opposed to the Capitol and the rally. It wasn't as reinforced. Or as I can guarantee you, there would have been a lot more police presence if they had known what was going to come. So
Yeah. And I think that that's a very like, this is a very educational moment for me, because when you put it in that context, it totally makes sense.
yes, exactly.
And again, going back to why these conversations are so important, because what, like, with the information that I get from the news or from social media or whatever, isn't always sharing this part of the story. So I
Okay.
think, like, for anyone that's listening to this, they could kind of have that eye-opening moment like I'm having right now, and that's a very realistic way of looking at it. And I appreciate that. Kind of
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
along the lines of um like police brutality and just like law enforcement and stuff. We didn't talk about this last time, but you are training, applying, working on getting into law enforcement
Correct.
where you live.
Yes, currently. So I'm trying to. I had recently taken. There's a police test to get you to just apply for the police, called the Police
Okay.
Consortium of Lancaster County. So I've recently done that. Done that the last 2 years, actually. So it is, law enforcement is something that I definitely want to get into, due to the current political climate that has surrounded me. Because I really do feel like I do have a voice. As I told you, I try to be as completely unbiased as I possibly can. I know that's very
Mhm.
difficult for a lot of people to do, and also be able to have someone that has the insight that I do, and be able to see both sides of every story equally. I think I have, hopefully, what will be an advantage once I do get in there, and that's why I like to have these conversations, because exactly like you just said, people aren't really thinking of that opposite side. They're only, yet again, seeing the effects, not the cause. And I want both need to be, as we talked about last time, when it comes to context is everything. So
Mhm.
it's just a matter of, looking it through the right scope. You can see the world in a much more clearer view.
Mhm. And yeah, I'm definitely excited for you and your future with that. And I think that and I don't think that I have any close friends that are police officers, so I don't know necessarily a lot about it, but I feel like from what I've heard, a lot of police officers have gotten a really bad reputation because of everything that happened last year, and I totally understand that all, like, those deaths were unnecessary. They shouldn't have
Absolutely.
happened, but I'm excited for you for so many reasons, but one is that you are going to be such a good role model and example of probably 99% of people in law enforcement. And people.
I can only hope so. Like I said, it's not something that it's easier being on this side to have these opinions, have these ideas, have these views, because I haven't done the job. None of us, unless you're in law enforcement, have done the job.
Right.
And so it's so much easier to, speak on these things as opposed to put yourself in those situations. I can only hope for the best, and make, I think, my personality will hopefully stay true for the most part and not be torn. But I mean, you have to understand, these are, individuals who see sometimes the worst of the worst of society. I mean, if you think about any police officer who was in any of those cities and any of those nights where someone was murdered, or, even after a night where there was, court held for the individuals responsible for those murders, and those individuals got to walk, what did they see that night? What do police officers see in those moments of pure chaos, where people just aren't themselves, or they're very emotional? What we need to see it from a different standpoint. Like, the police officers are still people. Like, they're
Mhm.
still have families, they have kids, they go and they play rec basketball, they do things just like we do. They're normal people. They
Mhm.
just happen to be in a line of work that it can be a little bit more political than it needs to be some days. And then, it's not like they're after us. Now, I wouldn't say there's a few bad apples, but most of them are, you go into law enforcement with the idea of to serve and protect. And I
Mhm.
think that we need to just remind ourselves like that, but next time that, if there's somebody who is, pro Black Lives Matter, like make sure like you're still being respectful. Being respectful is the number one thing that will continue to take, our entire species to the next level. Like we cannot grow in human history without being respectful to one another. It is so crucial that we do that. So um I always get lost in my tangent when it comes to police officers, but
Yeah.
that's hopefully it gives you a better, lens to look through essentially.
Mhm. One of my neighbors, they had, like a blue flag hanging from their house. I think his brother was a police officer or something, and I think that they had the flag hanging for a long time, like, probably, a year or 2, and, at the end of last year, they got, like, a bunch of hate mail pretty much in their mailbox, and it was just like, it was just, like, so unnecessary, and it's like, he was just supporting his brother,
Yeah.
and then for someone to go out of their way, they ended up sending an email to, like, the entire neighborhood and was like, does anyone know who did this?" Like, and there was a lot of communication, and it was, like, kind of a big deal in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Um, and they actually ended up moving, which I don't think it was for that reason. I
Yeah.
think it was just coincidence, but it
Yeah.
was just, like, it was just so unnecessary, and
And that's what I mean. Is like, I mean, you think about it. I mean, it's like it is a flag that definitely represents police, which I think is good. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think there's like this negative connotation with that flag that doesn't represent Black Lives Matter. And every single time I see that flag, to the best of my knowledge, it is our American flag with black and blue stripes.
Mhm,
I think it means blue lives matter, but I always have seen the black as like we're in this together. I've always seen it as like black and blue. It's not just, blue lives matter. It's a literal black flag too, which blows my mind. I don't know if that was the original concept, but every time that I see that, I get hope from it, if anything.
mhm.
It's both black and blue. Like we're in this together. All of this that started happening because of police brutality, like on black individuals. Like it's I think it embodies and encompasses everything. And I think that's just my perception of it, but I wish other people would see that same exact thing. Instead, it's shared by individuals who aren't as supportive in those ideas. And I think we need to turn around our thinking and be like, hey, this probably does actually represent something a little bit bigger than
Yeah.
just Blue Lives Matter. So
Yeah, I feel like it definitely has gotten that negative connotation that people see that blue flag and they're like, "Oh, they don't support Black lives," when that is not the case at all.
exactly. Yeah.
And if they do have that thought process, it's because of the few bad people,
Yeah.
but that have given them that thought process. But like we said last time too, like there's bad people in every culture, in every profession, in any geographic area. Like there's bad people everywhere,
Exactly.
that are giving like a bad name for that, for the mass group of people.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I'm gonna one more question, and so what are your thoughts on Trump being banned from social media platforms?
Oh man.
This is
You
and
had to do this to me.
this is we don't have to get into it. I've just have seen some
Yeah.
people saying like it's about time. These are private companies. They have every right to not allow him. And then there's the other side that says this is like freedom of speech. Like
Yeah.
so yeah, just kind of want to hear. No
Oh,
right or wrong answer, obviously,
this
but
is I'm gonna come out and just state for the record, I almost have no answer, no
okay.
clear answer. I want that to be known. I've tried to work through this in every different manner, and yet again, I'm gonna come with the perspective of both sides as
Hmm.
best as I possibly can. For the exact incident, I'm gonna isolate our president Donald Trump for just 1 second and say his tweets prior to everything last Wednesday, leading up to, we'll say, up to last Wednesday, were, in my personal opinion, I would say definitely led and incited violence.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see it any other way. Just as I told you, cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
Tweet it. All these people were there. Next thing you know, boom, Capitol is overrun. I think being a man in that position, like you're powerful. Your words, all of our words, are dangerous at times. They can be uplifting, they could be hopeful, they could be spiritual, or they can be dangerous. They could be toxic. They could be backstabbing. So words are a weapon, and we have to use and choose them wisely when interacting with other people. And that's why I really do believe that the incident from last Wednesday, it was incited. It had been building up, but I think that was almost the catalyst that led to all that destruction and the few lives that we lost.
Mm-hmm.
Now, afterwards, what I saw Twitter had gone and banned him, I was like, for a temporary moment, I was like, that's relief, because that is something there. He is unpredictable. He is not a typical politician. I think we could all agree with that. This is somebody who, voices their opinion, and he was different. He was different, and I respect anyone who's able to be different. Like, it's not easy, especially in a political lifestyle setting. You don't see a lot of politicians do that kind of stuff, obviously, because of the ramifications that you saw from this. So, on a short scale, yes, I was I was a little happy that they did do that, and they did ban him, just because his words, obviously, that was dangerous. That was beyond dangerous. That was a weapon at that point. When you can weaponize people, that's a severe threat to
Mm-hmm.
other individuals. And that's how I always look at anything when it comes to something of this, magnitude. I will always look at it as, will there be lives be threatened? Will lives be
Mm-hmm.
lost? If so, how can we stop that? How can we prevent that? And I think, I don't know if he had looked at that, in retrospect, and saw what that would do, but I hope that he understands now why, he's moving out of office and a new president is moving in of the opposite party. The bigger scale, though, when it comes to censoring people, any individual now, I think, and I talked about this with my wife yesterday too, because she's always good at playing devil's advocate with me, is, what if we start censoring people, who's to say at any point in time, like, you won't be censored, I
Mm-hmm.
won't be censored for sharing views that are not in line with, a certain company. And obviously, when we think about Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, obviously owned by the same person, that's a lot of influence. That's a lot of power. I can talk about power all day, about how it can be one of the greatest things in the world, or it can be extremely dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And it all depends on who's using it. And that's any company or any man that has the ability to censor one person, it's not the end of the world. But when you could censor a majority of people at any point in time, we've seen, crazy dictators in the past and people of strong influence, essentially be able to kind of incite violence or incite, their opinion on other people, to the point where their opinion is the only one that's right. And that, when I look at history, like, you think of, like, the Hitlers, like,
Mm-hmm.
that guy just, he started off, he had people in a small room that was overly heated, and he got people, angry, and just was screaming at them. And what else are you going to do when you're in a small room, you're sweating, and the other people are angry? You're going to get angry too. You don't even know what you're getting angry about. That's the
Mm-hmm.
crazy part, as you don't see it. And he obviously led himself into great power and used it absolutely maliciously. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, I'm not saying that, social media is going to end up doing that, anytime soon. But the second that you start using censorship like that on people, especially a huge political person, where do we draw the line? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what becomes dangerous. So like I said, I have no answer. I wish I had an answer on this one. But when it comes to censorship, it's a powerful, very extremely powerful tool. we're talking social media platforms have reach literally that connect the entire world. So it's, where do we stop? Who gets censored, who doesn't get censored, what gets shown, what doesn't get shown. Like if this was, think of Twitter and Facebook started in 1920. Let's go to 1960 instead, during the civil rights movement. Who's to say if, the owner of Twitter was, a huge white supremacist, is my voice being heard?
Mm-hmm.
Are my
Yeah.
opinions being shared, or am I being censored? And I know this is, an extreme, hypothetical, but just think about it. Am I able to share my voice? Am I,
Yeah.
whether I'm right or wrong, I should be allowed to share my voice. And that's where I have the conflict, is I don't know. Like I said, I always play the 1% probability. If there's always a 1% probability, you must take it as an absolute certainty. And I think this is one of those moments where it is very dangerous to play with censorship. And I think how it was used on Trump, I think, was appropriate. I just hope that it wasn't nuclear, because
Mm-hmm.
it's, where it's going to open up the conversation of censorship, moving forward. And this is something I'm open to talk about with anybody, at either side, because I really think it is something that definitely can have strong influence on the future free world. And I think we need to have these conversations now, before it gets to censorship leading to be too powerful. Like, we have to, as people, need to keep it in check as
Mm-hmm.
best as we can.
Yeah.
Hope I answered that.
Well, no, I mean, and there, like you kind of said, there is no right or wrong answer. And one thing that I just appreciate about our conversation in general, from this call, like from the last call, and then from conversations we've had privately, is that you can see both sides of it, which I think is so important in learning and in hearing other people. And so sometimes I feel like being in the middle of something isn't a bad thing, because you can see both sides of it. And that's really where I feel like having an open mind leads
Exactly.
you to learn and to hear the other side and to really grow. And you can have your own personal opinion, which is totally fine. Everyone has them. But if you can't at least have a conversation and see where the other side's coming from, I feel like that is where, in general, we get into a lot of trouble.
And I would like to say that goes for both sides.
Yes,
As much as I
absolutely.
possibly can. Is I definitely know that I lean one direction more than the opposite direction, but ultimately the thing that I have to remember at my core value is, if I am as personal as I am, a people person, and I'm as caring, as loving for other human lives, I have to be receptive to everyone, whether
Hmm.
they share my opinion or they don't. They don't share my opinion. I have always taken it as, this is something I can learn from. This is something I can take away. I could see a different viewpoint, because we always get so upset and angry at different viewpoints. But when have we ever sat down with the individuals and asked the question, why?
Hmm.
I mean, when is the last time, like, we don't do it. We never do it, because we get so angry that they're so this way, and we don't understand, as I told you before, context. We never understand why they are the way that they are. If
Hmm.
we gave that moment to just listen to them for just 1 second and hear them out, and let them just say, hey, explain it, tell me what made you think, this is okay, or this is the right way, and I will always tie that back into, how does that pertain to making mankind and life better for everyone? And typically no one's going to argue that. They're going to see that their viewpoint is either it's in line with that, or it's not.
Hmm.
Can't argue, how are you bettering the entire people
Yeah.
if you are thinking in a wrong mindset? And that's where, like I said, it's a learning for both sides. And I think we need to be
Yes.
receptive no matter what side you're on. Be open to at least listening, as opposed to going straight for the jugular on someone that you don't agree with. It's
Yeah.
just, like I told you, it doesn't do any good for anyone.
Absolutely not. And I just have so much respect, and I try and be that way. And I know that there's moments where we're all not perfect. And I'm sure that there's times when I could be more open-minded and hear someone else's side.
Yeah.
But I like, just especially this conversation, I feel like you've been able, like you said, you were going to come at it from a very objective point of view. And I think that that's helpful for a lot of people, because then one, and also once you understand both sides, you can kind of form your opinion and your thoughts and beliefs more. And I think once you kind of have that, that goes back to like living into your integrity and your values. And once you figure out like your opinion and what you value, you can then figure out how you're going to act and move forward. And so I just feel like it's all important. And then again, just to have an open mind, because we're all, like you said, we're all trying to better society, better mankind.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're allowed to disagree. We are allowed to, and that's totally fine. But it's
Exactly.
cancel culture, like you keep saying, is not okay. So
Exactly. We can
yeah,
disagree, just be respectful about it, agree to disagree, walk away, do whatever you can. Just don't have, the unique conflict that, gets put on media. Please. That's the last thing that any of us needs. Nobody wants their lives changed like that. So
yeah, yeah. Well, that's all of the questions that I have. Do you have any other comments or topics that you want to discuss?
honestly, no. I think this has been something, hopefully that was enlightening for the audience, something that was, beneficial, something
Mhm.
that kind of hopefully stirred you a little bit and, hopefully allowed you to do some critical thinking and do some self-reflection, because all those things are needed for us to grow as individuals. And when we grow as individuals, we can affect those around us in a positive way. And I think
Mhm.
we just need to keep having these conversations, as tough as they may be. Speak to a loved one, speak to family. If any of my family or any of my friends are listening right now, like you guys know, I try my hardest to preach this as much as I can. And, this is something that I like to talk about, but also at the same time, hold me accountable
Mhm.
as you can. I know Sally will, obviously, but just we need to keep each other in check, not at each other's throats, but keep each other in check and, be respectful, be mannerful. And this will all just be history at the end of the day. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much again. And I know we discussed having another conversation, but having it more like fitness focused.
yeah.
Just another topic that you and I obviously always discuss. So,
Yeah.
if anyone's watching this, stay tuned for more of like a fitness informative conversation.
We'll be here.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much, Sal. Thanks for having me.